Hey everyone, in this video let's take a look at a challenge that has been posted by Chandip Chabra on his YouTube channel Goodly. And basically in this challenge we have this data set and you can see that he's also trying to explain in this video as well. So I'm going to go to the Power BI and in Power Query you can see that this is the data that we have to work upon. So let's take a look at the example of the first row. You can see that the cost item here is sales ERP, then we have value, then we have location. So what we want to do is we want to expand this data set into four different locations. So if we take example of sales ERP, what we want to do at the end of the day is that sales ERP should be shown four times, once for India, once for UK, then for USA and Australia. And not only that, we also want to divide this particular value into four different locations, or maybe depending upon how many location a particular row has. But we do not want to stop at that. We want to continue on and expand the rows further based on the businesses as well as the department column. So you can see that sales ERP will expand for India, UK, USA, Australia. Then it will also expand twice for the trading and the heavy equipment. So meaning 4 times 2 is 8. So 2 rows for India, 2 rows for UK, 2 rows for USA and so on. Then again, we will expand the department column. So it will again expand everything 3 times. So that will become 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 3 is 24. And once we have 24 rows for sales ERP, we need to adjust this particular amount into those 24 rows. And we can divide this amount by, let's say, 24. Let me just bring the calculator on the screen. And this is the number that we are going to get, which is 52,083. And if I go into the solved version of this query, you can see that the sales ERP starts at the first row and then continues on till 24th row. We have rows for Australia, USA, UK, India, whereas the allocated amount is now 52083. So basically dividing that 1 million something by the number of rows that are going to be expanded. So let's begin and let's see how we can use Power Query to get to that result. And I'm not going to use the UI version for solving this particular problem. Instead of that, I'm going to use dedicated Power Query functions. So we are going to write them from scratch so that we can actually feel we are using some kind of coding inside Power Query. So let's begin and let's see how we can solve this problem. All right, so let's begin and let's go to the work in progress query, which only has a single step, which actually references the original data so that we can start from scratch. So the first thing that we're going to do is add a custom column just to get the code of this particular step. So let's name the column as test and let's click on OK. And I'm also going to rename this step as cross join. Let's press enter and you can see that for each row of this data, we have added a 1 for each row. So let's close the query setting and now let's go to the advanced editor. So let's zoom in a little bit so that everything is easy to see. And the first thing, let's move everything to the next line because the code that we're going to write, most of the code will be inside the cross join step only. So we need to make sure that it is formatted correctly. So after each, what we are going to do is we are not going to write one, we are going to nest a lot of steps. And to create another subquery, we need to use the let keyword and also the in. So the first step of this query will actually retrieve the current row of the table that we are iterating with the help of table.add column. So to get the current row, we can create a new variable or a new step. And I'm going to use the underscore operator, which basically allows you to access the current row. And just to show you what we are getting, I can return the current row step as well. So if I click on done, you can see that we have created a record which contains all the values from all the columns of the particular row. So for this row, all the values have been retrieved in a record. For the second row, the values of the second row have been retrieved in this record. So now that we have the access to all the values of the particular row, what we can do is we can actually start splitting the location, business and the department column into separate lists. So right now you can see that all the values for a location are actually concatenated in one single cell. What we want to do is we want to create a list containing location, a list containing business as well as the department. So the location list will contain 2 rows, which will be India and USA. The department list will contain 3 departments, which will be sales, finance and HR. So let's go to advanced editor so that we can write a few more lines of code so that we can split everything. And the first thing or the first step we need to create is split department. That will be basically a text.split, and we want to split the value of the department in the current row. So how can we get that? Since we have already retrieved the current row in the current row step, we can reference that. So we can say current row. And since we want to access the department column, we can open the square bracket and here we can write that department. And in the next argument, we need to specify the separator that will be used to create that list. Sorry, to separate that text so that it can be converted into a list. And that separator will be a comma and a space. So let's try to return this particular variable. And if I click on done, you can see that we have a list which shows that it has sales, finance, ops. In the second line, it has sales, finance, HR. For the one where we do not have more than one value, we only have one single value in the list. So similarly, we can actually split the business as well as the location as well. So let's go to advanced editor and let's create a few more steps for the location as well as the business. So I'm going to say text dot split the current row, and we want to access the location column. The delimiter is the same. So let's close that and let's copy this step. This one will be split business and this column will be also business. Let's make sure the spelling is correct. So if I return the split business step just to make sure that everything is correct to this point, let's click on the list and you can see that we have separated that single cell value into two different rows. So we get consulting, trading and trading heavy equipment, consulting and manufacturing. So far everything is working. Let's go to advanced editor, and the next step that we're going to create will basically convert the location list to a table so that we can actually create a table that will have 24 rows that is a cross join of the department, location as well as the business. So let me just show you how we can do that. So we are going to create a step which will be location list to table is equal to table dot from list, and we are going to first use the split location variable, and let's try to return this variable. If I click on done, you can see that we get a table. So nothing is different from the list. It is just a one single column, but this time the data type is of table instead of a list. So we can actually add more columns to this particular table. So let's go to advanced editor, and before that I also want to make sure that the name of this table is actually not column 1 but something else, and I think I should use the location word for the naming this column. And for that, let's use the code table dot rename columns, and we are going to rename the column 1. So let's use a curly bracket, column 1. I think there is no space in that, and this one will be named as location. So let's close the table dot rename. If I click on done, you can see that this particular column is now named as location. So let's go to advanced editor once again. And now all we want to do is we want to add new columns to this particular table. So for that, we can use the table.add columns function. So first of all, let's add the business column. So we are going to say that table.add column, and we are going to add it to the location list to table variable. The column name will be business, and basically we want to add the list that we have already created in the previous step, so which is split business. So let's write split business and let's try to return this variable. If I click on done, I get an error. So let's see why. So let's go back for a moment. The reason we are getting an error because I'm not using the each keyword. So let's click on done once again. And now you can see that for India, we have a list, for UK, we have a list, for USA as well, we have a list. And this list basically contains trading heavy equipment. And now let's go back to advanced editor once again, because we also want to add one more column, which will be for the department. So let's copy everything and let's paste it here. This one will be add department, and this one is going to be added to the add business step. So let's rename the column to department, and we are going to say that split department. So let's try to return this particular step and let's click on done. So you can see that for India, we have added two different lists. Similarly for UK, for USA and Australia. So now that we have added the business list as well as the department list to the location column, what we can do is we can actually expand the business list or the business column as well as the department column within the code that we have written so far. So we need to create two more steps that will help us in expanding these two columns. So the first column that we need to expand is the business column. So we can write or create a new variable which will be expand business is equal to table dot expand list column, because that column contains a list. So we are going to add it to the previous step, and the column that we want to expand is the business column. So let's close that and try to return this variable. And if I click on this, you can see that we have actually expanded the business column. So now India is repeated two times, UK is repeated two times, because there are only two businesses for this particular cost item, which is sales CRP. And let's go back to advanced editor so that we can expand the department column as well. So I'm going to copy this code. Let's create a new line and let's name it as expand department. And the column that we're going to expand is the department column. So let's try to return that. Let's click on done. And if I click on this, you can see that we have expanded India three times. Then we have expanded, sorry, we actually have an error in the business list. So let me just fix the code because I'm not referencing the immediate previous step. So if I click on table once again, this time you can see that India is expanded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, because we have two businesses as well as three departments. Then similarly, UK is expanded depending upon how many businesses and departments are there. And if I click on the next line, you can see that the data is actually consistent. We have expanded India and USA for consulting and trading for the departments, which are sales, finance, and HR. And the next step is to adjust the value that we have in the second column for each row of the table that we are creating inside this code. So let's go to advanced editor. And the idea is that first of all, we need to identify how many rows are there in the table that we have expanded. So for that, we can create a new variable, which will be row count is equal to table dot row count. And we need to use the previous step, which is expand department. So if I click on done once again, this time you can see that we have 24 rows for the sales CRP, 12 rows for the next line, then 4, 4, 32 and 96. So based on this number, we can actually divide this value by 24, this value by 12. So let's go to advanced editor. And finally, in this expand department step, which is actually a table, we are going to add a new column which will contain the adjusted amount. So for that, we are going to create a new step, which will be add allocation is equal to table dot add column. And let's go to next line. So the step is expand department, I think, right? And the name of the column will be, let's say, allocated amount, or maybe adjusted amount would be much better. So let's write adjusted amount, and we need to use the each keyword. So how can we access the value, or the value actually is also the named value is in this case as well. So the value of the value column from the table that is outside of the code that we have created. So for that, if you remember, we have created a current row variable. With the help of this, we can actually get the value of the value column that is currently iterated by the table.add column function, or in easier word, the value from the current row itself. So for that, we need to write that current row value. And now since we have the number that we want to use for the adjustment, we can simply say that divide this particular value by the row count variable that we have created in the previous step. So if I go ahead and return this result or this variable and click on done, you can see that we get a table which contains 24 rows. You can actually count that it contains 24 rows, and the adjusted amount is also correct. We are dividing this particular number by 24, and we are repeating that particular amount for each row of that table. Finally, what we want to do is we want to remove all the columns except the cost item as well as the test. So for that, we can actually use the choose column option. So we can say keep cost item and the test. So if I click on OK, so now we have only two columns, cost item as well as the test, which contains the intermediate table that we have created on the fly with the help of M code. And the next step or the final step is basically to expand this table or this column, which will in turn expand all the tables in every row of that particular column, and it will tag the cost item to each respective table of that particular row. So if I click on this option and just make sure that this option is unchecked, and you also check the load more option so that no column is actually skipped, which is not getting visible in this particular drop down menu option. So if I click on OK, you can see that now we have repeated the sales CRP column 24 times for each location, business and department that was there in the original table, as well as we have the adjusted amount that we have calculated in the M code. And finally, we can select all the columns, go to transform and click on detect data type. So we have all these text column as well as this decimal column. And I think since we are not having, we are not interested in the high precision, we can actually keep it as a fixed decimal number so that we can actually reduce the number of decimal places that we are storing so that it doesn't take too much storage space on the RAM. And if I go into the next, or if I scroll down, you can see that for countrywide training, we have 25 to 36. For India, USA, consulting, trading, and there are three departments, sales, finance, and HR, and the number is also correct. So that was how you can solve this particular problem, or I should say that that was actually one of the many ways of solving this particular problem. And you can go to the Chandip's website and you will find many more solutions that are maybe better than this one. But I generally try to use the table functions or the list functions more than any other function. So I always try to stick with the table or the list function. But I have seen that people have used some functions such as list.accumulate and I think list.generate as well. So in case if you're interested in finding out more complex solution, you can head over to Chandip's website and you will find much better solutions. I had a very simple one, so I shared it. And that was all for this video, and I will see you in the next one.